Elias Carter stood in the dim glow of the hotel hallway, his breath slow and controlled, though his heart hammered as if trying to escape the cage of his ribs. The muffled laughter spilling from the ballroom felt strangely distant, yet every sound pulled him closer to a truth he had tried to avoid for years. He gazed at the double doors, gold-trimmed, elegant, polished. Everything his family expected their successful son to be. Tonight was Daniel's big night, a moment their parents had been counting down for years. Elias had come only to quietly leave a simple, thoughtful gift for his brother. No celebration, no applause for him. He didn't resent Daniel. He never had. But as he stood there in a lonely corridor, surrounded by luxury he didn't feel worthy of, he sensed the weight of being the forgotten child, the silent shadow in his own family story. Just as Elias turned to leave, the ringing laughter from inside sharpened, followed by his father's unmistakable voice, loud, careless, soaked in alcohol and pride. "Elias? He's our disappointment son," Martin declared, as though it were a family joke everyone had heard before. Elias froze mid-step, every muscle in his body tightening. His mother's voice drifted in next, cool and unquestioning. "He wastes money on worthless ideas. We stopped expecting anything from him years ago." Those words hit harder than any physical blow, knocking the air out of him. Elias had always suspected their disappointment, but hearing it spoken aloud, casually, publicly, felt like a wound being carved open in real time. His throat tightened, eyes burning, but he refused to let a single tear fall in that hallway. Humiliation flooded him, mixing with heartbreak and a slow-building fire he had never felt so fiercely before. With shaking hands, Elias placed a neatly wrapped gift on a chair outside the ballroom, his final attempt at a gesture of love that felt painfully undeserved now. Just as he turned away, he heard a familiar voice, Daniel. His younger brother stepped out, confused, hurt, worried. "Bro, why didn't you come in?" Elias tried to smile, but the expression barely held. "I wasn't invited," he said softly, forcing strength into words that trembled. Daniel opened his mouth, but Elias gently stepped back, refusing to let his brother see how broken he truly was. As he walked into the cold night air, the city lights flickered around him, but nothing could distract from the echo of his parents' words. Beneath his breath, as frost formed in the air, he whispered a promise, a quiet storm beginning to rise. "One day, you will regret calling me that." Elias Carter grew up in the quiet corners of his childhood home, backyards, tool sheds, and the small patch of soil behind the garage where he planted his first test crops at age 9. While other kids ran through fields kicking footballs, Elias crouched over the ground, fascinated by soil texture, moisture patterns, and why certain seeds grew better than others. He built his first homemade moisture sensor, using a broken calculator and scrap wires from his father's workshop. But instead of pride, his parents responded with dismissive glances. Martin laughed, calling him the weird one, while Janet scolded him for wasting time on hobbies only slow kids care about. Their voices became constant background noise throughout his childhood, shaping him into a quiet, withdrawn boy who learned to swallow words before speaking them. Yet beneath the silence, a stubborn spark formed, small but unbreakable, in the Carter household. Daniel was a golden child, loud, charismatic, athletic, and destined for the medical field their parents worshipped. Martin boasted about him to every relative, while Janet micromanaged his schedule like a project she had already decided would succeed. Meanwhile, Elias became the background son, the one constantly compared, corrected, reshaped, and belittled until he barely recognized his own worth. But in adulthood, Elias found a fragile refuge, a cramped rented garage that smelled of solder, metal, and determination. Here he worked with Riley Brooks, a sharp-tongued coder whose brilliance was only matched by her lack of patience, and Ava Miller, an environmental engineer whose calm presence and quiet faith in Elias kept the team from collapsing. Together, they were trying to build something revolutionary, a soil health microsensor that could transform modern agriculture. But the dream was crumbling fast. Investors dismissed their invention as unrealistic for small innovators, and funding had dwindled to the point where they were rationing electricity hours. Elias' parents called weekly with reminders that this childish fantasy is over, urging him to abandon everything and move back home to work a real job. Each call chipped away at him, reopening old wounds he thought he'd grown past. Still, a dangerous determination simmered beneath his quiet exterior. A tension coiled like a wire pulled too tight. He felt unwanted, invisible, perpetually underestimated. Yet something inside him refused to die. He knew their technology worked. He knew it could change farming forever. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't willing to let the world, especially his parents, decide his worth. Failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. For the first time in years, Elias felt genuine hope flicker inside him. The highly competitive AgTech grant, worth a life-changing $250,000, was their last chance to save the startup. He spent nights rewriting proposals, refining diagrams, and preparing presentations until the edges of his notes tore from overuse. The only missing piece was a legal signature confirming rights to the small farmland he had inherited from his grandfather, a formality, he hoped. He scanned every document, wrote a heartfelt explanation, and sent the file home. As he clicked send, he imagined for once his parents might see the brilliance in what he'd built. Maybe they would support him. Maybe they would acknowledge him. Standing in his garage with oil-stained hands and exhausted eyes, he whispered to himself, this could change everything. He had no idea the moment that form reached his parents, the last thread tying to them would finally snap. When Elias visited home to pick up the signed documents, he expected indifference, maybe even irritation, but not destruction. Martin sat at the dining table. The form spread before him like an accusation. Without a word, he tore them down the middle, then again and again, paper falling like white ash to the floor. You're not using MY land for your stupid inventions, he growled, voice thick with finality. Janet didn't soften the blow. We're leasing the land to Daniel. He'll use it properly. You don't deserve it. Something inside Elias cracked. Years of swallowed pain surged upward all at once. Why do you hate me so much? He asked, voice shaking but steady. Martin didn't hesitate. You were born slow. Some kids are just disappointments. The word stabbed deeper than any insult he had ever endured. This wasn't a moment. It was a lifetime of cruelty breaking open at last. Elias didn't shout. He didn't cry. Something colder and stronger flooded through him. Clarity. Without another word, he stepped back, turned away, and walked out of the house he had spent his entire life trying to be accepted in. With each step down the driveway, his breath steadied, and for the first time, the weight of their judgment began peeling off him like an old skin. At the sidewalk, he pulled out his phone and called Ava. We're done waiting for permission, he said, voice razor sharp. Then he called Riley. We build this thing ourselves, no matter what. Their shock turned quickly into resolve. In that moment, Elias transformed from a quiet kid no one believed into a man who would no longer ask for approval. The betrayal didn't break him. It ignited him. The days blurred into each other as Elias fought battles on every front. Investors ignored their emails, their calls, their carefully crafted proposals. Silence became the only response. Their landlord left eviction notices taped crookedly to the garage door, each one more threatening than the last. Critical equipment failed, prototypes glitching at the worst times, sparks flying dangerously from circuits that had been patched far too many times. Elias pushed himself harder, forcing his body into 16 to 18-hour workdays, surviving on instant noodles and adrenaline. Daniel tried to reach out, offering help quietly behind their parents' backs, but Martin and Janet shut him down. Don't involve yourself in your brother's failures, they ordered. Janet even sent Elias a message. Stop embarrassing us. Every word, every setback, every sleepless night tightened pressure around him. It felt like the world was deliberately trying to crush the one dream he had left. IT happened late at night. One more test, one more chance, one more desperate try. Elias connected the final wire to the prototype, and for a moment, the sensor hummed with life. Then a sharp pop echoed through the garage, followed by smoke. The prototype exploded into fragments, the failure ringing louder than anything else. Elias sank to the floor, shoulders trembling, tears finally escaping after months of being pushed deep inside. He buried his face in his hands, his body shaking as if everything he had held back was now clawing its way out. That's when Ava walked in. She knelt quietly beside him, not touching, not rushing, just present. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. You don't need their validation to build something world-changing. Her words didn't fix the broken sensor, but they stitched something inside him back together. Something he thought was gone. Fueled by Ava's words and a renewed determination, Elias and his team worked through the night. They tightened circuits, rewrote code, resoldered faulty wiring, and recalibrated the sensor's core algorithms. Hours later, the device blinked steadily, alive, stable. When they tested it in a small patch of soil outside the garage, the screen displayed its first accurate reading, 98% precision. Elias felt something he hadn't felt in years, victory. A small victory, but However, the celebration didn't last long. At a recent pitch event, Elias had shown a rough demo to attract attention. Now, a new article appeared online. AgriNova, a massive competitor, announced a project strikingly similar to theirs, almost identical in concept and structure. They had stolen it. The team stared at the screen in stunned silence. The world wasn't done testing him. The tension snapped, rising to its highest point yet. The nation was cracking under the heat. News reports showed drones flying over withered fields, and farmers tearfully describing the worst drought in decades. Crops curled inward like dying paper. Soil crumbled under boots, and the agricultural economy trembled. For Elias, the crisis was an opportunity, at least not at first. It was a gut punch. He knew what this meant for farmers who already lived season to season. But Riley saw the numbers, and Ava saw the patterns, and all three reached the same conclusion. This was the moment their sensor was built for. They drove across 3 states in a beat-up van with barely enough fuel money, offering their technology for free. In 72 sleepless hours, their sensors mapped moisture pockets hidden deep beneath cracked soil. Farmers followed the data, redirected irrigation, and watched, astonished, as hundreds of acres were saved from the brink of destruction. The world had ignored Elias until now. The breakthrough should have been quiet, but fate had other plans. One farmer, overwhelmed with relief, recorded a shaky TikTok video. Standing beside Elias' sensor, he said with raw emotion, "This small startup saved my entire crop." Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. By morning, it had passed 30 million views. News outlets scrambled to trace the story to the tiny garage startup no one had ever taken seriously. Phones rang nonstop, journalists wanting interviews, investors begging for meetings, and even the USDA requesting a pilot partnership. In living rooms across the country, people saw Elias explaining his invention with humility and precision, standing beside the device built through sleepless nights and heartbreak. And somewhere far away, Martin and Janet Carter sat rigid on their couch, watching the son they believed appear on national television. His words were calm, steady, piercing. No one believed in us, but we believed in the farmers. The momentum hit like a tidal wave. A Fortune 500 agriculture corporation sent an email marked urgent requesting an immediate meeting. Within hours, they were offering to acquire the startup for $8.5 million. A number that should have made Elias scream, jump, cry, something. But instead, he stood still, absorbing it quietly. Riley punched the air. Ava wiped tears. But Elias simply looked down at the prototype on the table, the same one he had cried over, rebuilt, believed in when no one else did. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a soft exhale that carried years of buried pain, he whispered the words that completed his entire arc. "For the first time in my life, I feel enough." It wasn't pride. It wasn't revenge. It was peace, earned, fought for, and finally, undeniably his. After the acquisition, the world expected Elias to disappear into luxury, to travel, to celebrate wildly, to burn money like someone who had finally escaped poverty. But Elias had never wanted extravagance. He wanted peace. The first thing he did was split the earnings equally with Ava and Riley, refusing to take a cent more than his partners. "We built this together," he said, sealing their bond forever. He then bought a small, warm home near a community garden, where mornings smelled like fresh soil instead of burnt circuits. On weekends, he drove to his late grandfather's farmland, the land his parents refused to sign over, and began restoring it piece by piece using his own technology. For the first time, the soil responded exactly how he had always envisioned. Watching the fields come back to life, Elias felt something deeper than victory. He felt rooted. He felt whole. Weeks later, the invitation arrived, an unexpected dinner request from his parents. The message was polite, almost warm, dripping with rehearsed pride. Elias accepted, not out of hope but closure. When he arrived, the house looked the same, yet everything felt different. Martin spoke first, boasting awkwardly about Elias being famous now, while Janet smiled too tightly, praising him as if she had always believed in him. Elias sat quietly, letting them speak, feeling none of the old desperation for approval. Their words slid past him like reflections on water, visible, but unable to touch him. He wasn't a fragile boy who once cried in garages or begged for their validation. They were trying to rewrite history, pretending their cruelty hadn't shaped him. And for the first time, Elias didn't shrink. He didn't tremble. He simply listened and waited. The room fell silent when Elias finally spoke. No anger, no raised voice, just clarity, the kind sharpened by years of pain and perseverance. "You don't get to call me a disappointment anymore," he said, his tone steady, almost gentle. The words weren't for revenge. They were a boundary drawn with unwavering strength. Martin shifted uncomfortably. Janet's eyes flickered, but neither dared argue. Elias didn't stay long after that. He didn't lecture them, didn't demand apologies, didn't try to change them. The power wasn't making them hurt. It was in no longer needing them to heal. Walking out of the house, he felt lighter than he ever had. His freedom wasn't the money, the fame, or the success. It was the ability to stand tall without carrying their judgment on his back. He had become the man they never believed he could be, and that was enough. The sun had barely lifted over the horizon when Elias stepped onto his restored farmland, the cool morning air brushing against his skin like a quiet blessing. Soft rays of gold spilled across the fields, illuminating each row of thriving crops he had nursed back to life. His soil sensors, once mocked, doubted, dismissed, now blinked gently across the earth like hundreds of tiny stars scattered across the ground. The rhythmic pulses of their data signals felt like the heartbeat of the land itself. As he walked slowly between the rows, he breathed deeply, savoring the scent of wet soil and new beginnings. Every footstep was a reminder of how far he had come, from a garage filled with broken prototypes to a piece of land reborn through his persistence. In this serene silence, he realized something profound. He didn't need applause to feel proud anymore. This piece was his victory. Elias reached the old wooden fence near the edge of the property and sat down on a weathered bench his grandfather once used. From his satchel, he pulled out a small, worn notebook, the same one he had carried since childhood. Its corners were frayed, pages smudged with dirt, ink, and years of quiet dreams. Inside were sketches of early inventions, half-formed ideas, diagrams of things he never had the courage to show anyone. Some pages contained painful reminders, notes crossed out after his parents mocked them, abandoned concepts he once thought were foolish. But today, the notebook felt different. It wasn't a record of failures. It was a testament to his resilience. With a steady hand, Elias turned to the last blank page and wrote the line he had earned not through revenge, but through endurance. They laughed. "I built. Now I rise." He closed the notebook gently. Like sealing a chapter of his life, as he stood and looked over the fields, the world around him seemed to slow. The early morning sun bathed the land in a warm, almost ethereal light, casting long shadows that stretched like memories behind him. In a gentle breeze, the crops swayed as if bowing to the journey he survived. The camera, if this were a film, would pull back now, drifting upward into a wide aerial shot. The blinking sensors formed constellations across the earth, while Elias stood tall in the center, a silhouette of calm strength. His posture was neither triumphant nor proud, just peaceful, grounded, finally at home within himself. After a lifetime of being unseen, he no longer needed recognition. The land saw him. His work spoke for him. His heart finally believed him. And as sunlight washed across the frame, everything faded to white. Quiet, beautiful, complete.